Hi, in this video I would like to talk a little bit on AI concepts and what sort of AI I've been using in my game, since I've had this question asked like millions of times since I uploaded my stealth AI zombie mechanic. And well, before we begin, I want to make a small disclaimer, which is this is not a follow what I do what I do, and you will get exactly what I get. This is more of I'll try and show you what I do, and then you'll have to find how to apply that to your project. This is better because it's, I think, easier for you to understand and learn what I'm doing instead of just copying exactly what I do. So if you do not know anything about programming or have very little knowledge on programming, I highly suggest you take some basic C# courses, go to codecademy.com and take one of their courses there on JavaScript or Java, which show the basic concepts of programming. See the Unity tutorials, the official ones of programming, both the basic and intermediate ones. And yeah, basically get some general knowledge before you attempt to apply this to your project. Or you could just experiment and try it out. Anyways, getting that out of the way. Okay, so here I have an example I want to show you. And first off, we need to know that the AI, especially when we have stealth, has two states. It has an aware state and an unaware state. The aware state means the AI is aware of the player, knows that the player exists and tries to attack him, and the unaware state is where the AI is just doing its business and does not know that the player exists. So, what I'm going to show you now is 3 ways that we're going to transition from the unaware state to the aware state. The first one, being this one, is if the zombie or other AI sees the player. So these 2 lines represent the field of view of the zombie. So we need 2 conditions to know if the player is being seen by the zombie. The first one is if the player is within the line of sight of the zombie. And the second one is to see if the player is within certain distance that he can be seen. Meaning, if I enable this layer, we can see that first, to know if the player is within the line of sight of the zombie, we measure the angle within the forward direction vector of the zombie and the player's position. So, if we measure this angle, generally, if the angle is smaller than 60 degrees, we know he's within the line of sight. 60 degrees is a good starting point to measure line of sight, because it gives you a full range of 120-degree angle, which is pretty wide and pretty realistic. And second off, we need to know the distance. The distance is, even though the player is within the line of sight of the zombie, if he's very far away, it would make sense that the zombie would not see him. So, basically, we need to do a condition that if the angle between the zombie forward direction and the player is smaller than 60, and the distance is smaller than some range, which we can define, it could be 10 units, then we make the zombie aware and the zombie does whatever it wants to do, say chase the player or whatnot. Unity has some default functions which we'll use later on, which are called vector3.angle, which returns the angle between 2 vectors, and vector3.distance, which returns the distance of 2 vector 3's. So this is the next example. Here I would like to show you how we transition from the unaware state to the aware state if the zombie AI hears or listens to the player. So here we have 5 zombies represented by these circles that are none of them looking at the player. It would make sense, though, that since they're nearby him, that if the player makes some noise, like shooting his stick gun, they would hear him and start attacking him. So, what are we going to do? Well, how this works is basically we overlap a sphere that origins on the player and has a certain radius. This radius is the intensity of the noise that we want to make. I'm going to enable this layer so you can see the effect. So this, imagine that this is a 3D sphere represented on this 2D image, and it has a radius of 10 units. Then say this gun makes an intensity of 10 in noise. We can make different spheres and different radiuses for different types of noises, because maybe, I don't know, using a knife and slashing at a zombie would make very little noise and could be like a one unit radius sphere, while shooting a grenade launcher would make a 20 radius sphere. So anyways, this sphere, what it does is it overlaps around the player and returns all colliders that are within this radius. Since all zombies in our case have colliders, because we want to register hit detection and we want them to collide, it will return all the zombie colliders as well. This function also uses a layer mask, so you can mask different layers, and we can only return the zombies if we put the zombies on a separate layer. In this case, this function would return an array of these two zombies. After that, what we do is we loop through the array and we send a certain function, say unaware, or we set a boolean aware equals true, or whatever we want to do through all those zombies. Here, in this last example, where we want to transition from the unaware state to the aware state in the zombie, what we want to simulate is the zombie perceiving the player, meaning that, I don't know, simulating other senses that the zombie may have, maybe like feeling. If the player is very close, he could be touching the zombie and the zombie could feel that, or maybe the zombie has a smell capability and he can smell the player when he's close by. So it would make sense that even if the zombie is not looking at the player and the player is not making any noise, that the zombie somehow might be able to perceive the player. So how do we simulate this? Well, we use a trigger that has a small radius around the player, and we have a listener on trigger enter function that when a zombie enters a trigger, we automatically use a parameter of a collider that enters that trigger and access the zombie script and make the zombie aware of the player, so he starts attacking. I would also like to add that if you want to add a functionality where, say, crouching and running have different effects on whether you can sneak on a zombie or not, you can change the radius of this trigger, meaning this collider of a sphere collider. We can change the radius of this depending if the player is crouched or if he's walking or running. If he is crouched, we can make the trigger very small. That way, the player can sneak up on zombies without being detected if he's crouching. But if he's walking, he may, if he gets very close, even if the zombie is not looking at him or he's not making any noise, the zombie could become aware. If he's running, we could make this trigger even larger so that zombies that are close by become aware of the player because he's running. So basically, that's how I implemented the stealth mechanics on my game. Now I will proceed to show you how the code works. Okay, so here I am in the editor, the Unity editor, and I have a mostly empty project. I have imported the standard characters package, and also made a couple of materials for my floor and the zombie, which I have not made, but will make using capsules, because if I'm not going to show you my project because it's way beyond the scale and scope of this tutorial. Plus, I'm going to release that game, so I really don't want to be showing too much of what I've got there. But I'm going to show you basically what the concepts I showed in the initial part of this video. So first, I'm going to use the first-person controller that uses the character controller one, not the rigid body one. And I'm going to open the first-person controller script. I'm just going to edit a little thing here. And, okay, having this open, we need a way to know if the character is running or walking. And I believe that there's this pool called M is walking, which basically, if it's false, it's running, else it's walking. We're going to use this to know how large the trigger that I showed you, remember this trigger here, how large we should make this trigger later on. So to be able to access if the player is running, we're gonna make a function that returns an int. So we're gonna make a public int get player stealth profile. I guess that's pretty descriptive. So here what we're gonna put is if M is walking, then we return 0. Else we return 1. Meaning that if this function returns 0, then we know it's walk. But if it returns 1, we know he's running. We're going to make an if later on if he's walking or running to make different sizes for the trigger for the third transition, the perception one. Okay, having made that, the second thing we need to do is an AI script. So I'm going to create a folder here. Create folder script. If this wants to run. Sorry, my computer is kind of slow because I'm light mapping my other project while I'm doing this. So I'm going to call this AI example, which is basically the concepts that I showed before in a small script, you know, like a zombie. So I'm going to reload this, and here, first off, we want a reference to the player. So we first have to use import, I believe, a namespace, which I believe is Unity standard assets dot characters dot first person. Yeah. And then we create a variable of type first person controller. First person controller. I'm gonna just call it FPSC. We're gonna assign this in the inspector. You can use a get component or find object of type function to assign this, which would be ideal, but I'm just, for the purpose of making this simpler, I'm just gonna assign it in the inspector. So next thing what we need to do is, well, first we need to make a boolean to know if this AI is aware, like I showed you before. I'm gonna actually have to make this public bool is aware, and we're gonna default that to false because he's not aware. Then we're gonna make a function which we're gonna run. I mean, what functions is in JavaScript? Public void search for player, which is a function. We're gonna run this at update, but it's just to separate and make the code easier to read. I want to make public void update here as well because we're gonna use this later. Here we're gonna put all the functionality that I showed you of the first concept, which is if he's within this angle and within certain distance, meaning if he is seen. So first we do an if statement. If vector3 dot angle, which is a function that I showed you before, between PSC. Now I believe it would be vector3 dot forward, and the next one would be transform dot inverse transform point, I believe. Transforms position from world space to local space. Yeah, I believe this is the one we need. Is smaller than 60 F. Yeah, that should be the inverse transform point, and we have to pass in the position, which would be FPSC dot transform dot position. So here what I just did is basically we're measuring the angle that I showed you before. We're checking if it's smaller than 60. We're comparing vector3 dot forward, which is short for 0 on the x-axis, 0 on the y-axis, and 1 in the z or z-axis, which would be the forward. And we're comparing the angle to the first person controller, meaning the player's position, but translated into local space of this zombie. Why do we need to transform this into local space? Because remember here that we're comparing the angle between this forward direction, which would be vector3.forward, and this position. But it would not work if we're in global space, because the 0 point could be anywhere, while if we transform it into local space, the 0 point would always be the zombie. I don't know if that's understood, but just know that if you do it in global space, it will not work. Okay, so if the angle is smaller, then we can actually put an FOV variable, which would be public float FOV equals 120F, which is the default field of view. And we can then just put it smaller than FOV divided by 2F. Why do we need to divide this by 2? Because remember, the full view is 120 degrees, but since we're comparing the angle since the forward direction vector, not from the one side of the field of view, there's only 60 degrees. So it would go 60 degrees to this side and 60 degrees to this side. In total, it would be 120. But we need to compare it to 60, because if not, we'll have double the field of view. And we can also make a public float view distance, which, let's make it 10 units. I think that's okay. And if vector3 dot distance between our FPSC dot transform dot position and our current position, which would be transform dot position, and we may have to make it smaller than view distance, then we make is aware equals true. So we're just making this bool be true so that later we can do extra functionality when is aware equals true. We can make an if statement. If is aware, then we make the logic here chase player, else we search for player, which is this function we just made. Actually, instead of is aware, we're gonna make one more function, which is called public void on, or make aware on aware, just a function that makes the zombie aware. Unaware, let's call it. And we're gonna just set is aware equals true. Why do we make this function? Well, actually I'm gonna make this private because we really do not need to see this in the inspector. Plus it would be better for encapsulation. Why do we make this function? Well, if you remember, here, not here, but here, the physics.overlap sphere function happens around the player. So it would make sense that we have another script that makes this overlap sphere and accesses the zombie script to make it aware. It would be easier to access this script if we have a function here that automatically makes all the logic, and which in this case would be just is aware equals true. So, well, here we have, we're gonna actually execute on aware here. Yeah, basically now the zombie should be able to see. In this case, we're gonna make the chase player functionality using the Unity navigation mesh. Bake. I think this is static. Yes, it's static. And we just bake, and we need to say the same scene. We're gonna make a basic nav mesh. And yeah, basically so our AI can chase us around here. Yeah. So we're gonna make our AI now. We're gonna make a capsule. We're gonna represent our AI. We're gonna add the material that I'm just made. You can just create a material or not. I think it should be better because what I'm gonna do is change the color depending on if he's aware or unaware. That way we can visually see what state he is in. So yeah, I'm gonna add that. I'm gonna call this zombie, and I'm gonna add a nav mesh agent. A nav mesh agent basically lets any object navigate around this nav mesh, which isn't really necessary since it's just one plane and there's no obstacles. But if you have obstacles, this is very useful. So yeah, we have a nav mesh. We have the script, which is AI example, which we should drag in here. If you want to add yourself. So yeah, and we have a first-person controller. We're gonna assign our first-person controller in here. The FOV and view distance is already there, and now we're gonna do the functionality so the player is chased. Also, I'm gonna just do. There's no way to tell if. Yeah, sorry. I'm gonna delete the main camera. I forgot to. We don't need it since we have the control. So, like I said, it's very difficult to see which is the forward direction of the zombie. So I'm gonna add a small cube that's child of this capsule or zombie, and we're just gonna make it point forward so we know which direction the zombie is looking at. So yeah. And then we're gonna, I don't know, rotate it into some other direction. God, it doesn't like non-uniform scale objects, so I'm gonna make it uniform. And just point in this direction. That way we know this is like the forward of the zombie. And, yeah, so now we're going back to our, which script is it? AI example script, and we're going to make this chase functionality. So first, we need to make a reference to our nav mesh agent. So we're going to, forgot before that, we need to do a namespace. I remember when we didn't need to do all these namespaces, but now we do. So using Unity engine.ai is called. That way we can access all the properties of the nav mesh. So we're going to make a reference to the nav mesh agent. So we're going to make a private nav mesh agent. So this will let us access this. This is my other project. And what am I doing? This will let us access the nav mesh agent component, and this to make it easier and not need to assign it. We're just going to make in start assign it in start. So we're going to go public void start agent equals get component agent nav mesh agent. There we go. So now that's assigned, and now we can just give it a direction. Agent dot set destination player FPSC dot transform dot position, which basically this function set destination gives the nav mesh a destination. In this case, we're passing in our first-person controller, the player, and that will make the zombie chase the player. And we're also going to change our color. We're going to make a reference to the renderer, private renderer equals get component renderer. So we're gonna make, if he's aware, renderer.material.color equals color.red. This will make the material color be red, and then if he isn't aware, we're gonna make him be, I don't know, blue, I guess. Renderer.material.color equals color.blue. Game. Okay, where is our first person? He's here. What am I doing? Okay, let's try this out. See what happens. So yeah, he's chasing me, but it's because he was looking at me when we started. If we make him, I don't know, look in some other direction, he's blue. But as soon as I go within his line of sight, he sees me and starts chasing me. Now, of course, there's serious limitations here, which means if he won't move until he sees me, meaning it would be very easy to avoid his line of sight. And second, there's no way to like lose him. He will chase you no matter what, and he will never lose you, even though you run like a huge distance from him. So there are several ways to change this. I will not go into this because this is just basic. I'm showing you the concept of, you know, the player being able to, the zombie being able to see you, which is what we just did. Now I'm gonna make the zombie be able to hear you. So for this, we're gonna need another script. We're gonna make the script be the player example script. Basically, what we're just gonna do here is add the physics.overlap sphere function that will overlap a sphere and return all colliders, and make them aware. I'm gonna duplicate that zombie so you can see it works with several zombies. So anyways, if this wants to load, I'm sorry for the delay, this needs to reload, and okay. So here, let's well, first off, what I'm gonna do here is make, if you click, it will play a sound and it will attract nearby enemies. So I don't have a sound, so I'm gonna find one. I think I have one here. I'm gonna use this for my project. By the way, this is a scene that's upcoming, sneak peek, that I'm working on. And we're gonna just drag it into our assets. I already had it imported. What silly me. I'm gonna delete one of these. So basically, this is just a gunshot sound, which I don't think I'm recording sound from my computer, but anyways, let's just imagine it's playing. So what I'm gonna do is make a public audio clip shoot sound, say a public float sound intensity, which this variable will be, I don't know, 5f, I guess. How much distance will the sound travel, and the zombie will be able to hear this. Meaning, if the zombie is 5 units or small or closer to the player, he will hear the sound. Else, he won't. So the larger this is, the larger, or I mean, the more intense the sound is. Then we're gonna make a public function, a void fire, which is our shoot. I guess sort of. It's not gonna shoot. It's just gonna make a noise and attract the zombies. If you have a shoot script in your project, you're probably gonna want to put this logic in here. We're gonna make a public void update because we're gonna check for input. Here we're gonna do if input.get mouse button down. I believe 0 would be the left mouse click. Meaning, if we click the left mouse, we fire. Now, here in fire, we're gonna do a let me think. First off, we need a reference to our audio source, which is gonna be, we're gonna add an audio source in to our player so we can play this sound. We actually already have an audio source, so we're gonna reuse this audio source, so I don't need to. We're gonna make a private audio source, a reference to our audio source, audio, which kind of just audio source, and make it a void update, a void start to assign this audio source. We're gonna make it audio source equal get component audio source. There we go. Then, now having a reference to our audio source, we can first play the sound, meaning audio source dot, we're gonna use a play one shot function we're gonna play. It asks for a clip, so we're gonna pass in the shoot sound. The next thing we need to do is make the overlap sphere function. So first we need to make, since if we go to the reference, I'm gonna open up the reference and search for physics.overlap sphere. Overlap sphere. This is a very useful function. You can use it for grenade explosions, which I use it for anything really. It's very useful, but it's very compute intensive as well. So you should not run this in update. It should be only a one-shot function. It returns a array of colliders which are within this overlapped sphere. So we need to store this array of colliders somewhere. So we're going to make a private variable within this function, which will be a collider variable. Collider zombies, which is just an array of colliders of all the zombies. And we're going to make this equal physics.overlap sphere. And it's asking for a position. So we're just going to pass in our position. Transform that position, meaning us, that's where it originates, and the radius, which we're going to pass in our sound intensity. Sound intensity. And it's also asked for a layer mask. So we're going to make a layer mask here. This is for optimization. It's not really required, by the way, but it's better that way. We don't have to filter out. We just know that this collider is just full of zombies and nothing else. Plus, it's more optimized. So I highly suggest you use a layer mask. Layer mask. Layer. Zombie layer. And we're going to pass in this layer mask. I'm going to set up that layer now. What am I doing? It's not a function. Semicolon. Now, if I go here, first off, let's make that finish compiling. And then, if we go to our zombie, we have our layers here. We're going to add a layer, and we're going to call it enemy or zombie. And then we're going to go here, and we're going to assign the zombie layer, no, this object only. That way, it will return this collider here, this capsule collider, because it's within the layer zombie. And then we have to, first we have to attach our script, the player example script to our player. And here it's going to ask for a shoot sound. So here we can put our gun shoot sound that I have here. You can put whatever sound you want. Sound intensity. This is the radius, remember. And here we just make the zombie layer be the zombie. That way it will only return an array of colliders of zombies. So after we have this array, we need to make a for loop so we can iterate through this array. For int I equals 0. If you know a for loop, I'm not going to explain a for loop. It's very basic. You should search up if you don't know what a for loop is. I is smaller than zombie. Shit. Sorry. Zombies dot length I plus plus. So here we're gonna first do zombies I dot get component. We're just gonna use get component, and we're gonna get the AI example script. So we're gonna, this is the way to access a script and call this function unaware, so the zombie becomes aware. Get component zombie. What the fuck am I putting? AI example. Shit. Example dot unaware. We call this function unaware. So basically what this is we fire. We click the mouse, we fire, play the sound, return an array of collider zombies within this sphere that starts in the player, has certain sound intensity, and only happens in the zombie layer. That way it will only return the zombies. Then, having assigned this array, we iterate through it, And for every zombie that's within this array, we get every collider within the array, we get the get component function. Hey, we access the AI example script on that specific zombie, and we make it aware. So yeah, that should theoretically work. Okay, let's try that. Let's try that out. I think that's all we need to assign. We have the gunshot sign. The zombie is here, and it's got the layer assigned. So let me see how this works. Okay. So there he is, and I'm gonna click. Okay, that did not work. I need to be closer. Yeah, I need it to be closer. So I'm gonna change the radius. The radius in the zombie. No, the player. The shoot intensity sound. We're gonna make it, I don't know, 20. Should be enough, I guess. So now, if I click, he starts chasing me. So there's no way to outrun him. So now, if I shoot, he chases me. If I go within his line of sight, he starts chasing me. The last and final thing is we need to simulate this trigger sort of perceiving, being able to see me when I'm close by, even though he's not looking at me. Sort of functionality. And we're gonna, first off, we're gonna go into our first-person controller, and we're gonna add a sphere collider, and we're gonna make it an is trigger, because we're gonna use this as a trigger. And then here we can change the radius, and here in the scene view we can see up to what point, meaning if the zombie enters this sphere, he will become aware automatically. So how close should he be? I don't know. If he's walking, let's make it, I don't know, a radius of 1, pretty close. But if he's sprinting, let's make it, I don't know, a little larger. So let's say radius 1 when he's walking, and a radius of 1.5 if he's running. I think that fits quite well. So now what we need to do, a radius. Yeah. So we need to go into our player script here, and we're going to use the Unity built-in function called public void on trigger enter. If you do not know triggers, I highly suggest you Google it, because it's very important and is one of the most basic and useful techniques in development. So we're gonna check if other dot layer. Can we check the layer? No. Dot game object dot layer. No, let's not check the layer. The best way to do this is make a tag. The easiest way, I mean. Probably a layer would work as well. But anyways, we're just gonna make a new tag, and we're gonna call it layer tag. What am I doing here? We're gonna add a new tag. We're gonna call it zombie, the same as our layer, and we're gonna assign our zombie to that tag, making the layer zombie, tag zombie. Easiest way, to be honest. So here, this is to check if there's not another object of type collider, meaning if we're just, you know, bumping into a cube that has a collider, or even the floor. We do not want to do this. We only want to do this if who is entering our trigger is a zombie. So we're using a tag for this. If other, meaning other is this parameter here, and that is the object that is entering the trigger. Other dot game object dot tag. No, actually dot compare tag is the function we need to use, and we pass in our string, which would be zombie. This is the name of the tag we just assigned. So if the object entering the trigger has a tag called zombie, then we want to other dot get component access the other and make it an AI, make it aware. So we're gonna access the AI example script and execute the unaware, you got it, function. Okay, so now we have the trigger functionality. The last thing we need to do is change the radius of the trigger depending on if we're running or walking. So here we're gonna do an if statement. If we need a reference to our first person controller here. So to do that, we're gonna do a using. We need to use the namespace of characters. We need a standard assets dot characters dot first person, like we did on the zombie script. Then we need to do a reference to our first person controller, and that is because we remember when we did this function at the beginning, get player stealth profile. This is the way to know if this returns a 0, we know he's walking. If this returns a 1, we know he's running. So private first person controller FPSC, and then we're gonna just assign it on start because it's in our same game object. That's just FPSC dot get component first person controller. So having that assigned here, we do an if statement here, an update. If FPSC dot get player stealth profile equals 0, meaning if we're walking, then we need a reference to our collider as well. Private sphere collider. This is to access. We're making a specific sphere collider because remember, in the player we have two colliders. We have the character controller, which counts as a collider, and we also have the sphere collider. So we need the sphere collider. Okay, so we have a reference. You got it. We need to assign it as well. So we're gonna make sphere collider dot equals get component. Actually, why am I putting a dot here? I should make it equal get component. There we go. Sphere collider. There we go. Finally, we can actually change the radius. We can make two floats here. Public float walk perception enemy perception radius. Remember we set this to 1. You can change it. Public float sprint enemy perception radius equals 1.5. You can adjust this. This is just be able to adjust this easily. So if you see the get player stealth profile equals 0, then we access the sphere collider dot radius, I believe, dot radius equals walk enemy perception radius for walking, and then else, meaning if we're running, we want the sphere collider dot radius to be equal to run. No, sprint enemy perception radius. So yeah, that should be everything we need to do. So let's check if this is all working. Okay. Okay, so remember, I'm not clicking, he's not looking at me, but if I get close, he perceives me and starts chasing me. Okay, that works. And finally, I just want to check if this trigger changes size depending if I'm running or walking. So I'm gonna put the scene view here so I can see the trigger. And see, when I sprint, when I'm walking, the sphere has a certain. I'm gonna make this bigger. Oh fuck! I clicked and I shot, and now he's pushing me out of. I don't know. He didn't quite almost push me out. Anyways, I'm gonna reset. I'm gonna make this bigger. Zoom in so you can see. So if I'm if he touches the trigger, he gets aware. We can actually make the sprint enemy perception radius much bigger, maybe 5. That way, we can see the difference. You see, actually I almost ran off there, but as you may be able to see, the radius like makes itself huge. You see, I just run and the radius made itself bigger, and the zombie is now chasing me thanks to that. So finally, I'm gonna just show you that this works with multiple enemies. So I'm gonna grab the zombie and duplicate it many times and see, so you can see for yourself. So yeah, first off, let's make this guy look at me. Okay, so he saw me. Fine, fair enough. Now I'm gonna shoot, and now 4 are now chasing me. And finally, I'm gonna try the perception one. See, now I sprinted and those 3 caught me, and then this last one now, if I sprint, he sees me as well, or perceives me. So yeah, as always, I really hope this was of help somehow. I'm sorry for the delay. I know I should have done this a long time ago, over a year, probably a year ago. But yeah, anyways, it's better late than never. And I hope this is useful. I hope you understood something. If you want me to continue this AI, maybe in the next tutorial, make this AI after a certain distance stop chasing you. Maybe he loses you. Yeah, maybe be able to kill the AI. I don't know, sort of that. If you have questions, you can leave them in the description. As always, I really hope this helped you, and try and learn something. If this is kind of hard to understand, try and, you know, fool around until you sort of understand what I'm trying to do here, because I'd rather do this basic tutorial where I'm showing you each piece of it, and you learn how each of these concepts work, instead of me just, you know, making a huge tutorial doing every little detail but not explaining anything. So anyways, that's all for now, and I'll see you on the next one.